I was sitting in the back of a black town car heading down Interstate 25 toward the Denver airport. It was late evening, the snow was just starting to fall, and I was exhausted after a grueling 3-day regional sales conference. I was 57 years old. I shared the ride with a sharp, ambitious junior associate who was barely 28, and we were quietly reviewing some contract terms on the drive. I reached into my leather briefcase to pull out a folder, and my hand snagged on the zipper of a small side pocket. The pocket tore open, and a single, brightly colored blue pill rolled out of my bag, across the center console, and stopped right next to the younger guy's phone. The silence in the back of that car was absolutely deafening. He glanced down at it, then politely looked out the window and pretended he had not seen anything. I quickly swept it back into my bag, feeling my face burn in the cold car. But the profound shame I felt in that moment was not just about being caught with a pharmaceutical crutch. It was the terrifying, quiet realization that I had become entirely dependent on a synthetic chemical just to feel like a capable man in my own bedroom. And the even darker reality was that the pill was requiring higher and higher doses to do the exact same job. If you are watching this right now, and you are quietly keeping a pharmacy bottle hidden in your DOP kit or the back of your nightstand, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I know exactly how degrading it feels to have to schedule your intimacy around a digestion window, and I know the quiet panic that sets in when you realize the medication is slowly losing its effectiveness. I am going to break down exactly how I walked away from the blue pill forever, and I promise you, the mechanical truth about how to rebuild your own biological hardware is something the pharmaceutical industry actively hopes you never figure out. I sat in the airport lounge that night holding a glass of club soda, feeling like my body was a leased vehicle that the dealership was slowly repossessing. I had spent the last 2 years treating the little blue pill as a magic eraser for my aging process. But when I finally had the courage to look at the actual clinical mechanics of what those medications do, I was horrified. The pharmaceutical option does not fix your engine. It does not rebuild your infrastructure. It is a chemical hotwire. It artificially forces a specific vascular valve to stay open, completely ignoring the massive degradation happening in the rest of the cardiovascular system. It is exactly like clamping a leaky hose while the water pump itself is failing. Eventually, the pump completely dies, and no amount of chemical clamping will force the pressure back into the line. I realized I was masking a total systemic collapse, and I had to rebuild the machine from the ground up using 5 specific, non-negotiable pillars of maintenance. The first pillar is understanding that the pill cannot amplify a physical signal that your body is no longer producing. Those medications rely entirely on your body producing nitric oxide first. Nitric oxide is the chemical gas that tells your blood vessels to dilate. If your internal Teflon lining is so damaged from bad food and chronic stress that it cannot produce the gas, the pill has absolutely nothing to work with. That is why they stop working over time. I had to physically rebuild my nitric oxide factory. I completely overhauled my raw material intake. I started consuming massive amounts of dietary nitrates every single day, loading my system with dark greens, beets, and the heavy structural fuel the body needs to actually synthesize the gas. You cannot force a physical reaction if you refuse to supply the factory floor with the required raw materials. When I fixed the fuel line, the natural chemical signal finally had the resources to fire on its own. The second pillar was an aggressive mechanical correction of a physical tourniquet I did not even know I was applying. Decades of sitting in boardroom chairs and airplane seats had turned my pelvic floor into a tightly coiled knot of tension. When men are chronically stressed, we physically brace ourselves by clenching our lower abdomen. Over 30 years, that constant clenching literally strangles the primary arteries that supply blood to the reproductive region. I was walking around with the parking brake fully engaged, wondering why the car would not accelerate. I had to consciously relearn how to release that physical block. I started integrating deep, targeted mobility work on my living room rug every morning, focusing entirely on breathing into the lower abdomen and forcing that dense muscle tissue to drop and relax. Releasing that chronic physical tension finally allowed the vascular pathways to open up naturally, without needing a synthetic chemical to force them apart. The third pillar required fixing the actual viscosity of my blood. You can have open valves, but if the fluid you are trying to pump is thick and full of sludge, the hydraulic pressure will never hold. My routine of airport food, late-night carbohydrates, and evening alcohol had kept my blood sugar chronically elevated. Elevated blood sugar physically thickens the blood and makes it highly abrasive to the fragile internal lining of your vascular system. I cut the dense grains and the nightly drinks completely. I started front-loading my hydration, drinking the vast majority of my water before noon to physically flush the entire system. By dropping the sugars and maximizing the hydration, the blood thinned out. The hydraulic fluid became clean and fast-moving again, reducing the friction and allowing the internal pressure to build exactly where and when I needed it to. If the mechanical logic of fixing the actual engine instead of just hot wiring the ignition makes sense to you, or if you have ever felt that cold panic when a medication stopped working the way it used to, hit the like button right now. It is incredibly important that we get this specific reality check in front of other men who are currently sitting in pharmacy lines, assuming a prescription pad is their only option for the rest of their lives. The fourth pillar was forcing my cardiovascular pump to physically adapt to a heavier demand. When I was relying on the pill, I was letting my heart become weak. I was avoiding strenuous physical exertion because my corporate life was already exhausting enough. But the human heart is a reactive muscle. If you do not force it to pump hard, it loses the structural capacity to push heavy volume to the body's extremities. I stopped doing slow, lazy walks and started doing heavy, high-tension resistance work with my legs. I forced my heart rate into the red zone for short, intense bursts. Pushing heavy loads with the largest muscle groups in the body forces the central nervous system to panic and drastically upgrade the cardiovascular plumbing. It forces the heart to pump with real authority. As my baseline cardiovascular capacity skyrocketed, my physical response in the bedroom returned because the primary pump was finally strong enough to deliver the required volume of blood on demand. The fifth pillar was entirely psychological, and it was the absolute hardest habit to break. When you rely on a blue pill, you completely destroy the natural rhythm of intimacy. You take the medication, and instantly a silent 45-minute countdown clock starts ticking in your head. You become obsessed with the window of opportunity. That synthetic timeline creates a massive surge of performance anxiety, which floods your body with adrenaline. Adrenaline physically constricts blood vessels. You end up chemically fighting your own body, taking a pill to open the vessels while your anxiety is desperately trying to shut them down. I had to have a brutally honest conversation with Alyssa. I told her I was throwing the pills away, and I told her that our physical connection was going to be unpredictable while I rebuilt my hardware. Taking that synthetic countdown clock out of the room completely removed the adrenaline from my system. We stopped planning intimacy around a pharmacy schedule, and by removing the heavy expectation, my nervous system finally felt safe enough to relax and operate naturally. Getting the raw materials right, releasing the physical tourniquet, thinning the blood, upgrading the pump, and eliminating the psychological countdown completely changed my life. I got my biological sovereignty back, but I am a realist about the damage a man accumulates after 50. Rebuilding a vascular network that has relied on synthetic hot wires for years requires an enormous amount of metabolic energy, and the microscopic vessels often need specific, targeted reinforcement to stay open. I realized I needed internal support to maintain the infrastructure I had rebuilt, but I refused to ever touch another pharmacy crutch. I went looking for a natural protocol with a clinical mechanism that actually supported the hardware. The daily formulation I rely on uses epimedium. This compound works along the exact same mechanical pathway as the conventional pharmacy options, but it does it naturally, supporting the blood flow without the harsh synthetic spikes, the dependency, and the crashes that leave you feeling exhausted the next day. The protocol also heavily incorporates alpha-lipoic acid. This is an antioxidant that specifically targets and protects the microscopic blood vessels, the tiny vascular lines that actually reach the destination where you need the physical flow to hold. I never tell another man how to handle his own health, but if you want to look at the exact formulation I use to keep my pathways clear and my engine running independently, I put a link in the pinned comment right below this video. You can also simply scan the QR code you see on your screen right now. I spent months cutting through the garbage in the supplement industry to find a clean mechanism that I actually trust. Because here is the deepest unspoken cost of the blue pill. It slowly steals your dignity. It trains you to believe that you are permanently broken, that your body is a liability, and that you have to ask a pharmaceutical company for permission to be a man in your own home. When that pill rolled out of my briefcase in the Denver town car, I felt small. I felt like an imposter. When I threw the bottle away and did the hard, unglamorous work of rebuilding my cardiovascular infrastructure, I did not just get my physical drive back. I got my quiet confidence back. I got the knowledge that my body functions because I maintain it properly, not because I swallowed a synthetic override. I stopped feeling like a leased vehicle and finally took ownership of my own machine. Many men surrendered to the convenience of a prescription because nobody ever tells them that the underlying machinery can actually be repaired. They accept the synthetic crutch and watch quietly as it slowly stops working. You do not have to live on a chemical tether just because you crossed the 60-year mark. You own the hardware, and you have the absolute authority to fix it. Tell me in the comments. Did you notice the pharmacy options working less effectively over time? And did anyone ever explain to you that it was because your underlying infrastructure was failing? I read every single comment, and I know exactly how frustrating it is to realize the supposed cure is actually just masking a larger collapse. Do not spend another year planning your relationship around a synthetic digestion window. The longer you let a prescription pill hotwire your system, the weaker your natural cardiovascular baseline becomes. Start changing your fuel viscosity and moving heavy loads tomorrow morning. Have the honest conversation to kill the performance adrenaline. And if you want to give your internal engine the specific cellular support it needs to protect the microscopic vessels and maintain the natural pathways, look at the protocol I use. The link is right there in the pinned comment below, and the QR code is on your screen. Take a serious look at the biological mechanisms of the ingredients. Decide for yourself if the logic makes sense for the exact physical frustration you are dealing with. I am Cole Harrison. Keep doing the work.